Hey guys, smash that subscribe button. Today in this video, I'm going to be discussing the topic of big versus small churches, pros and cons. So, this is a super fast video, just give me a few minutes. I'm going to try not to rant. Some of the pros of a big church is you're going to have a lot of different ministries available to serve in. Usually a whole myriad of different ministries. Things like maybe serving the homeless, things like maybe clothing distribution for the disenfranchised, the homeless, poor, maybe ministries related to things like human trafficking, ministries related to things like, maybe a young married couples ministry, maybe a elderly ministry, just a myriad of different ministries that you can serve in whatever your gifting is as a Christian. And that's definitely one of the big pros to a big church, is a myriad of different ministries that you can volunteer in many different capacities. Also, a ton of different small groups, probably from different age ranges, different Bible studies, all these different sort of various activities that allow you to engage in the life of the church. Now, in a small church, one of the big pros is it's going to probably be a little bit easier to meet people. You're only going to have a handful of people, maybe 50 people. Most of our smaller churches around Southern Orange County have around probably 50 to about 100 people max. And they really thrive. They do really well for the most part. But one of the tricks with a small church, especially in our area, one of the big battles with being part of a smaller church is letting people in your community know that you actually exist. Like, hey, we're part of a smaller church. Maybe you invite your neighbors. But that can be one of the really big battles. I think, especially in our area, people tend to always sort of gravitate towards bigger churches because they know they exist. They're used to seeing sort of a building and a sign. It's like an obvious, like, okay, this definitely exists. I also think one of the big pros to bigger churches, people usually assume that their kids' ministry is sort of functional and safe and secure. They just tend to sort of always assume that. I know it's sort of a bummer. Smaller churches, there are certain things that parents might be a little bit more hesitant of, which is unfortunate. I think that's sort of an assumption that we as parents can make sometimes, like, oh, maybe this is a little bit janky or iffy. I'm a parent, and I think we can totally be guilty as parents of making that assumption. Smaller churches, church life, things like potlucks, there are some real big pros to that. The aspect of people sort of contributing. People tend to be maybe a little bit more in smaller churches. One of the pros would be people can sometimes feel like it's more of a family, that this is really something that is part of really the way they live as a follower of Jesus. They're fully integrated in the life of the church. I know a lot of our bigger churches in Orange County, there are some awesome bigger churches in Orange County. One of the big battles can be, how do you actually plug in and integrate into the life of the church? Unless there's a functional, maybe like a 1 to 3 step process to integrate into the life of the church, that can be very hard to get plugged into a bigger church, and it can be really intimidating and daunting if we're talking thousands of people that maybe they come in on a Sunday, maybe they leave on a Sunday. You're going to have a lot of people that, of course, are cultural Christians that show up on Sunday and bail and don't feel like they really need to be integrated in the life of the church. They feel like, hey, I don't need to attend a Bible study on Tuesday night, or maybe they just can't because of work. It's going to attract a lot of people that are maybe, unfortunately, are coming at Christianity with a bit of a consumer mindset. And like I said, that's going to be one of the big barriers of getting involved in the life of a big church, is you're going to have to figure out, okay, how am I going to be able to get involved, and what is the best way for me to get involved? I think some of the best big churches in Orange County are churches that really have serious strengths in the department of understanding how to effectively incorporate people sort of into the life of the church. And there are some great bigger churches here in Orange County, and there are some great smaller churches. There are definitely pros and cons to both big and small churches, and that's sort of what I want to talk a little bit about in this video. I think also discipleship is something that small to medium-sized churches really thrive in. It can be really hard to find like a Christian mentor or someone to really take you in, disciple you, and help you grow in your faith. At a bigger church, that can be something that can be very tricky, unless there's maybe like a process to match people up with people to disciple them. Discipleship is super important. Discipleship is not just sort of showing up to a class or reading a book on it. It really is having, hopefully, I have a few people that are older in the faith who I literally meet for coffee and different things, and we actually talk about our lives, and we pray for each other throughout the, really throughout the days. Um, and they're there for me and I'm there for them in our walks with the Lord. So discipleship is really pivotal in the Christian life, and that can be a tricky thing to find at bigger churches. In smaller churches, there tends to be a lot of emphasis on discipleship. Now, in smaller churches, sometimes there's like emphasis on discipleship to the point where things can become sort of awkward and insular, maybe almost like cultic. So that can be a hard thing to find too, is a healthy balance in terms of discipleship in smaller churches. I think with smaller churches, sometimes you have so much emphasis on discipleship to the point where people almost can sometimes feel like they maybe are just going to so many church events constantly, they don't have time to really breathe and actually apply their faith to their own life, which is really critical in the Christian life. I know I've been in seasons of my walk with the Lord where I was serving like 7 days a week in church and got into the grind, which was good. It was a good rhythm, but then it was very hard to actually practically live out my faith and actually apply what I learned in church to my everyday life. And that's really important too. That's a big part of our walk with the Lord, that, when we hear a good message on Sunday, we're actually able to apply that to our ordinary life, maybe on a Tuesday morning or throughout the week, especially when we get into times where we're battling certain things in our lives. That's super important. And it's also important to, to recharge maybe midweek at a good Bible study, or, midweek service, and also just really actually know people in your church. That's something I really want to encourage you guys. If you really know people and can build relationships with other Christians that actually live in your area, that's huge. That's super important. I think that's one of the biggest battles for anyone out there who maybe is a church commuter. Maybe you commute like over a half an hour or something to a church. That can really be hard then to meet people that are believers in your area. So this is a fast video on pros and cons of big versus small churches. Pretty straightforward, guys. God bless. Have an awesome day.